What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode with Broke Girls Art School. In today's episode, I will be showing you how I used these resin molds to make these projects. And as always, I will be tagging the links to the products that I use in the description box below. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to support my channel, and drop a comment. Let me know what you guys thought, if you like these techniques, and if it helped you out. But yeah, let's get started. All right, so real quick, I'm gonna be going over the supplies that I'm using. This is the epoxy resin that I like to use. Amazing clear cast. You can find it at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. My favorite alcohol inks are this Pinata brand, and I also like these ones. I think it says Ranger on there. I got this from Michael's, I believe. Don't mind my fingers, they're all dirty from my projects. But I really like those. For gold, I recommend getting the Pinata, and I always recommend getting an extra large container of white ink, because when I'm doing my mixes, I always use white in between my colors, so I go through quite a bit of it. Next, you're going to need your molds. So this is like a nice little tray mold, and then this is gonna be a wine holder. And then I also have these ones that I'll be using for coasters to go with the wine holder. So now I'll start going through the steps of the process. If you want a little bit of a more in-depth tutorial, I'll tag a link to another epoxy video that I have, where I kind of go through everything a little bit slower and explain it more. But pretty much what I do is I usually use red Solo cups because they're a bit bigger than the clear cups you can buy, and tongue depressors. And I'll put the tongue depressor in the cup, and then I'll just grab a marker and mark wherever I want my line to be for how much I want to fill up the epoxy. And then I'll stick this guy in my other cup, mark it, because you want to make sure that those lines are perfectly even, because if you have an unequal amount of part A and part B, then your epoxy resin will not cure fully and it will ruin your project. So definitely want to avoid that. And then after you get your epoxy poured out, you're gonna keep it in your separate cups, and then put these inside of, like, I usually use like a big pot or something, and then I'll fill it up with hot water from the sink, and then let those separate parts rest in the water for probably 10 minutes or so. If you warm up the epoxy, it lessens the chance of bubbles getting in your work, and it makes it easier to pop those bubbles. And that just makes your projects look way better, in my opinion. So yeah, we'll check back after I get my epoxy all set up. Also, when you're putting your epoxy into the water, be very, very careful not to get any water drops in the epoxy, because that will also interfere with the chemical reaction that needs to happen for it to harden fully. All right, so now I'm going to start mixing the epoxy. So you're gonna take both of your part A and part B and mix them into a separate cup. Make sure to scrape the edges to get all of the product out of there. Yeah, once you mix the epoxy, you have about, I'd say, 15 minutes of working time or so, maybe a little bit less, depending on the brand that you use. So you're gonna wanna work quick. I recommend having everything that you're gonna be using already set up for you, so you can just go straight to pouring. The best way to avoid bubbles is by mixing very slowly, and try to avoid doing a motion like this, because if you are lifting the tongue depressor or whatever you're using to mix out of the epoxy and putting it back in, that will add more bubbles. So we're gonna keep the epoxy, or the stick, touching the bottom. And then every like 30 seconds or so, make sure to wipe the sides of the stick, because one of the parts of epoxy is a bit thicker than the other, and you wanna make sure that that doesn't build up on the sides of the cup or on the mixing tool. You're gonna wanna mix for about 5 minutes, and you'll be able to see when it's fully clear and you won't have any streaks in there, then you know that you got a good mixture. So I'm gonna pop this in time lapse while I mix the rest, and then we'll start pouring. All right, so I went and threw on some gloves, and now that our epoxy resin is all mixed up, we're gonna start pouring. I'm gonna start with the two bigger things, and then we'll see how much I have left over for the coasters and grinder here. So to avoid lots of bubbles, we're gonna pour nice and slow. I'm not gonna do this like super thick, so I don't want to use too much resin. Just enough to where I know it is all covered. Alright, now we're going to move on to the wine rack. It looks like we're not going to have that much left over. Yeah, so we're just going to do the two big ones for now. I might mix up some more epoxy in a minute here and fill up the rest of the stuff, because I prefer to just get it all out of the way at once. Make sure you scrape all of that out of the cup. All right, and the next thing we're gonna need to do is pop some bubbles. So I use either a torch or a heat gun. I prefer the torch personally. I feel like the heat gun just like makes the epoxy absorb so much heat. It gets super, super hot. I feel like the torch kind of stays more on the surface. And notice I'm constantly moving my hand. You don't want to keep your hand in the same spot for too long. All right, and then you're gonna want to grab a toothpick and go around the edges and make sure you unlodge all of those bubbles that are caught. The less bubbles, the better. And I wouldn't go too crazy with this. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect because the alcohol ink will kind of camouflage the bubbles a little bit. I just always try to make sure they're out of the corners so that way it won't affect that smooth edge. Alright, so I'm actually going to try this time around throwing my gold leaf in first, because I think it'll look cool if I have my gold leaf with like the epoxy resin kind of going through it. And you can mix in your gold leaf with your epoxy as you're mixing, but I feel like that kind of creates more bubbles. And I like being able to make sure the flakes are spread out evenly. Like here, I'm just gonna go right around the center. Go too heavy with the gold leaf. I wanted to have some bigger chunks in there. So then I'm going to grab my toothpick and kind of try to submerge them so they're not just laying on the surface. Yeah, it's nice to put the gold leaf in first as well, because if you do your drip first and then you put the ink on top, and you have to push it down with the toothpick. It affects what the epoxy design looks like, so I feel like this will come out looking a bit more organic, because once I drip the alcohol ink in, I won't have to maneuver at all. And keep in mind, what's on the top right now is going to be on the bottom once you take this out of the mold. So I'm going to maneuver some of this a little bit closer to the very center of the wine rack. Yeah, I love this gold leaf though. It has a really cool effect in the epoxy, and you know, I like doing dried flowers and stuff, but I feel like gold leaf, it's not going to change its composition at all or the color, so looks really good. All right, and now I'm going to start dripping my inks. I'm going to go with like a purple and pink theme over here on this tray. So yeah, I just bought this other kind of ink off of Amazon. I don't even know how to say it. It's like YRYMHT. Make sure you guys can see it. I do not recommend this brand. It has a wide range of colors, but the bottles are really small, and I feel like the pigment doesn't spread out enough onto the resin, so I recommend the Pinata brand or this Ranger brand for sure. So I might go actually with kind of a theme with these, so I could sell them as a set, and maybe I'll do like the matching coasters and everything. So I like doing my drips pretty symmetrical. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing over here, the corners. And a lot of this, I just kind of do it as I go and see what I'm liking. I've been enjoying like simpler color palettes lately, or just going with like warm tones or cool tones. So usually with my colors, I will do the color drips, and then I take my white ink and I do white on top of that. And what the white does is help push that color through the resin. And when you layer them, it has a really nice effect. Alright, so now I'm going to go in with my pink. I'm so excited. I already know I'm going to love these colors. And the ink doesn't need to be perfect. That's kind of the fun part about it. Be mentally prepared for a lot of mistakes when you're working with alcohol ink and resin, because epoxy is a bitch, I'm not gonna lie. And it's really messy and it's a pain in the ass, but when you make something cool, it's totally worth it. So I really liked this like pistachio color ink. That's with the Ranger brand. And this is a bit of a lighter color, so I'm going to do 2 drips in each circle before I do my white, just to make it a little bit more pigmented. Now I'm going to grab my darker rainforest green. This This is the Pinata brand. I'm gonna grab this like aqua. Just do it right around the edges of our green stuff. Alright, so now I'm looking for a lighter purple. I'll go with this purple. Now I'm going to get a little bit messier around the edges. Now that I have that kind of symmetrical base down. I'm gonna grab my indigo blue. Yeah, I always say I'm gonna have a simple color palette and then I go kind of crazy, but it'll be sweet. Maybe next time I'll actually keep it simple. Alright, so you guys get how I'm doing my drip system. I'm gonna pop this in a time lapse for the rest of it. Another tip, you guys, if you want to like spread ink out at all, you can take a bottle of just pure alcohol and see if you drip it in. You don't do too much, just a few drops will get the job done. Like I want to kind of clear out the area where the gold leaf is. So you can see as I drip, it kind of pushes that other ink away off the surface. Nice thing about alcohol is it dries pretty quick. And I want these to look pretty even, and this one's green kind of stayed a little bit stronger in the middle, so I'm going to add a little bit of green over here to kind of make it look similar. Then I'm gonna mix it in a little. And if you want to push the patterns at all, you can always just lightly blow on the top of it. I'm getting a really cool like ocean effect in here. But honestly, I think the backs look pretty cool as is most of the time. You can see up close. The front's gonna be even cooler. So we're gonna wanna let this sit for at least 24 hours. Make sure that they're on an even surface, because if they're on a tilt, then the epoxy will dry unevenly and you won't have an even thickness on both sides. But yeah, we'll check back in 24 hours and see the final results. All right, and then I did go ahead and do another batch of epoxy. So I did a couple of matching coasters. I'm doing my little herb grinder, and then another wine and glass holder. And then I'm just throwing my leftovers and some little pendants here and there like I usually do. But yeah, I'm using the exact same techniques, just a couple different colors for the other wine holder, but... Alright, so these are the final products from the matching set that I did. I did some other things in there, but... So here you can see up close. It looked awesome once we flipped it over, and you can see all that gold leaf, and this is kind of still a little bit see-through in the center, which I wanted. And then around the edges here, it's more concentrated alcohol. So these both, yeah, pretty much the same color palette because I was doing the same drip systems with them. They both turned out great. And then we have some matching coasters here to go with. And then a nice little herb grinder as well. Actually fits super nice. It like spins real easy, doesn't like catch at all. This is just another mold off of Amazon, so I'll tag all my molds and everything. But yeah, these turned out great. I'm super excited, and I can't wait to use these molds for more color themes and patterns. But don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see some more work. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your guys' projects. Have a good day.